Hello there, and welcome to our 2023 Christmas special of Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. So last year we took an incredibly long dive into the really weird jingle cats, which was, a whole thing unto itself. Today we're going to be diving into something that's a little bit more up my street, as well as introducing a new mini-series into weird music once again. Since the regrettable passing of Steve Roden earlier this year, I've been slowly introducing myself to more and more of his incredible compositions, with the idea being that I'll cover more of them on the show and introduce you to much more of his music, because there is just this incredible body of work waiting to be discovered there. And so, weirdly enough, we're starting this little mini-series with a Christmas episode, because this album kind of ties into themes of it, I would say, which will hopefully make sense later on in this video. And so, without further ado, I present Stars of Ice by Steve Roden. And so, in today's special episode for 2023, and in this mini-series covering the many different works of Steve Roden, which, they'll be in no particular order, I'll just say. We're taking a look at the 2008 album Stars of Ice. So, what is Stars of Ice? Well, Stars of Ice is a 33-minute composition sourced from Chinese Christmas carols. And so I thought, with it being sourced from Christmas carols, this would be a perfect album to cover for our episode of Weird Music, for our Christmas episode of Weird Music, And so, let's talk about it. Originally released in 2008 in signed and numbered editions of 250 copies, this was, without a doubt, not even was, but is without a doubt, one of the most beautiful compositions Roden has composed, I feel. This one just exudes this incredibly somber but warm energy throughout its entire 30-minute runtime, and it's just such a lovely little thing to listen to. As well, this album was also re-released in 2022 on digital format by none other than Room 40. I have a feeling it may have been slightly remastered, but I'm not 100% sure, as there's no indication as such. And so, to talk about this album and the whole Steve Roden thing, and discussing his albums, what I think will be worth doing in a lot of these videos is discussing the liner notes and reading out the liner notes as they are, just so we have the necessary context for what it is we're hearing. So for those of you who know, don't know actually, some of you may know this is what I mean. Steve Roden's whole body of work sort of involves taking, sound sources from very unusual places and reworking them into these, long-form compositions essentially. And it's a very interesting process, I would say, and it's resulted in this wonderful music essentially. And so discussing the liner notes essentially and reading it out will give us the context for what it is that's contributed towards this album, if that makes sense. So, on the Bandcamp for Stars of Ice, we are told the following: all sounds generated and/or organised by Steve Roden at the Bubble House, November-December 2008. Sound sources: the Chinese Christmas carol Stars of Ice, from an old 7 recording, the song Snow, from the 78 set Songs from the First Grade Reader, and various other objects and instruments. The poem is the lyrics to Stars of Ice, with numerous words erased. Cover photo, anonymous RPPC circa 1900, Ice Cube lifted from And the Bee by Angela Baker. And so, this is one of those things that it tells us a whole bunch and it also doesn't tell us a whole bunch, I'll say in regard to the poem, we're going to come back to that towards the end, so, put a little pin in it, put it up there, we'll come back to that. So, what are we told? Well, we're told that the main sources of sounds come from these Chinese Christmas carols, essentially. And as a result, what we've got is this incredibly gentle, lovely vibe that permeates throughout the entirety of this recording, I would say, giving it this really lovely Christmassy atmosphere. And I'll say here, I'm not too familiar with the original versions of these songs, truth be told, but I'll be honest, I don't know if it's all entirely that necessary. Roden ends up creating this entire sonic landscape that just exudes such loveliness anyway, that it kind of makes me want to keep it a bit of a mystery, if that makes sense, It's a little bit odd to say the least, but I just like it when, you kind of have to just go on what you're feeling and what you're thinking when you're listening to a particular body of work, if that makes sense. And when it comes to this one, I just love the emotion, the feeling, the whole vibe of it, essentially. Anyway, let's discuss the composition itself then and what we're hearing, shall we? And so, Stars of Ice opens up with this incredibly gentle, simmering ambience. Something that I can only describe as an organ, maybe, playing these lovely droning layers that just descend so subtly and beautifully, But from here, the composition just gradually flows and evolves into this incredibly rewarding soundscape that effortlessly moves from movement to movement. And there is a kind of melancholy to the drone itself, I find, and to the composition. It's something that just feels really heavy and full of emotion, and I wonder if maybe a part of feeling this way is in respect to the passing of Steve Roden earlier this year, but I'm not so sure, I just wonder if maybe I just find this so beautifully emotional that that's the case, Regardless, the composition really starts to open up when the sounds of processed voices start to enter the fray, almost singing a Christmas carol in reverse, I feel. And what it comes across as it's like Roden has taken the most minute of details from these particular carols, like the expansive of voice, the faintest moment of a melody, just the way a particular voice is sounding as the voice just glides up and down on a particular word, for example. And by looping it over and over with these, very gentle and subtle droning effects, we end up with something that's just so lovely and beautiful to listen to, essentially. And it's lovely because after a while of listening to all of this, the voices themselves just start to sound so familiar and lovely, and all you want to do is just listen to those gentle incantations for as long as humanly possible, I say. What's interesting, though, is the composition does move into other directions when Roden starts to add more voices into the fray, more momentary fragments like that, the gentle hum, these indiscernible voices, whilst another voice is saying words in reverse, or one would assume perhaps. And it adds more to the ambience of this that the composition is offering, essentially, so much so, I'd say. And there's something so wistful about the whole song, I feel. Oddly enough, it kind of reminds me, listening to this whole thing, the way the instrumentals sound, the voices and everything. It reminds me of that kind of middle era of Disney films, that quaint kind of soundtracks you used to get with a chorus of people doing the most beautiful, loveliest sounding vocals, essentially. And it's that particular old style of recording where sounds came out in a particular way due to the microphones that we used, the equipment used to master it, essentially, It gives it sort of that faint sort of like sepia tone quality, if that makes sense. And as a result, it just makes the whole composition so wistful and melancholy but beautiful. And all I want to do is just sit back and just let this whole composition unfold in its own time. I should mention a couple more of the musical elements in this one, though. In true Steve Roden style, there's an abundance of tiny little micro sounds occurring throughout the entire recording, accompanying those gentle droning layers submerged beneath the vocals that form so much of the listening experience. But it's around roughly 19 minutes in when you just get the appearance of what I would say is actual instruments. You're kind of getting this gentle plucking of acoustic strings, creating this truly lovely little experience that, to me, it kind of reminds me of snow falling past the window, essentially. What I find interesting, though, is that the composition starts to become a little bit peculiar and eerie, though, I would say. Especially when you're introduced to this instrumental layer that sounds like a string instrument, but it kind of leads the composition into this interesting direction, where we're then introduced to different sounding vocals. Gentle humming, words in reverse, vocals coming in from all sides of your hearing spectrum. And it becomes almost a bit confusing, but there's still something gentle and comforting about the piece anyway. And it still offers up so much of that beautiful wintry landscape that dominates so much of this recording. I say I find it genuinely quite remarkable, the kinds of directions, recordings and compositions that Steve Roden has produced, the directions they end up going in, essentially, You kind of can find yourself sort of gently nodding along to the whole experience, only for it to suddenly change into something entirely different. But what I love is, even with that, the whole thing sounds so cohesive, It all just gives off this incredibly melancholy but lovely, beautiful Christmas vibe, Feeling like gazing out at those Christmas landscapes you get on those Christmas cards where everybody's out in the snow having a lovely time, essentially. That sort of gazing into the past kind of thing, I would say. And so, earlier, the liner notes mentioned a poem, lyrics to Stars of Ice with numerous words erased. And so, this poem wasn't present on the original release's Bandcamp page, but was included in the physical copy. But luckily for us, the Room 40 digital release of Stars of Ice has the whole poem written out for us on the Bandcamp page. And so the poem as follows. Stars of ice, wheel of moon. Light bright shine. Stars moon gently fade. From far silvery light. Hum quiet flocks. Abundant. Circle round. Grassy. Fly. Sudden light. Wondrous. The streets. Sound. Miles on miles. In awe. The clouds. Distant. Boundless. Peaceful. Love has come. And I find it worth reading this one out, essentially, as it seems to be an important piece of context for the composition itself. It kind of helps, for us, it kind of helps paint the entire picture for what it is we might be feeling and experiencing when listening to this particular track. And I think there's something kind of cool about it, And of course, in Roden's experimental way, there's kind of a bit of vagueness to it, perhaps. Something that we as listeners kind of need to feel and interpret for ourselves. But that is what makes experimental music like this so interesting, in my opinion. You just get so many different things coming out of it based on what we know, what we have read, or understand, essentially. And I'll be honest, poetry is always one of those things that goes a little bit over my head sometimes, but whenever reading a poem, I always get a sense of emotion from it, which I think is the importance of poems, essentially, or at least the importance I ascribe to them, essentially. And with something like this, it's, with something that is so emotive as this entire composition, it just all results in this really beautiful thing, essentially. And yeah, with that, I guess we're coming to the end of our special 2023 Christmas episode of Weird Music. I'm really glad that I came across this one, because it's become one of my top favourite compositions by Steve Roden now, and maybe one of the most beautiful things he composed, that I know of thus far, to be fair. There's still so much to be discovered, of course. There's just something so gentle and subtle about this composition, and it gives me a really true sense of the Christmas season for some reason or other, Most likely from the use of the Christmas carols, truth be told. But there's just something so lovely about it, something so beautiful and just downright gorgeous about the entire thing. What I think is also really cool is with this, you essentially, for you out there who, are looking for stuff for your Christmas playlists, alternative Christmas playlists, this one is definitely worth adding to it, I'd say, as it just unfolds so slowly and beautifully. And so, of course, in the new year, we're going to discuss many more of Steve Roden's future works in future episodes. A couple more written up. They're all just going to be in quite a random order, but I think, in respect to his regrettable passing this year, I think it would just be so worth discussing more and more of his amazing body of work, because there's so much that he created and stuff, and I think as difficult as it will be, I think it'll be worth talking about as much of it as we can, And so with that, I would like to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. If you're actually at all familiar with Steve Roden's work, then by all means let me know in the comments what some of your favourite ones are. I think I asked that in the previous one, but let's keep discussing it, let's keep getting more and more of these albums talked about. And with that, I wish you all the best. Hope you take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.